He gave his entire life for his boss and was abandoned as if he had never existed. Have you ever heard someone say their last words? Now imagine hearing something so profound, so sincere, that no one could hold back their tears. This is not just another sad story. It's a real-life open wound where ingratitude cuts deeper than any knife, where sacrifice is forgotten and abandonment becomes the only fate for those who most deserved respect. In this story, you will meet a character who doesn't speak like us, but feels much more than many humans. A being who carried heavy burdens, faced the scorching sun, the merciless rain, and the years of tireless work, all without ever complaining. A faithful, silent, strong companion. An ox. Yes, an ox. But not just any ox. We are talking about someone who, from an early age, was shaped by hard work, pulling carts, ploughing the land, and accompanying his boss as if they were one. Every drop of his sweat was a delivery, every step a gesture of trust, every day a demonstration of loyalty. And how was he rewarded? With abandon. When he became old, tired, with shaky paws and dull eyes, he was not welcomed. It wasn't remembered. He didn't receive affection. It was discarded, like a broken object, like something that has lost its usefulness. They threw him in some corner, far from the fields he once knew, far from the boss he still looked to with hope. But what no one expected is that he would leave something behind, something impossible to ignore. A scene so powerful, so full of silent pain, that it made even the toughest of men hang their heads and cry. The last attitudes of that ox, in its final moments, were more human than many actions we see out there. And it's at this point that we need to stop and think, how many times have we seen stories like this? How many times has ingratitude spoken louder than recognition? How many times do those who donate the most end up being the first to be forgotten? This story is not just about an animal. It's about values we are losing. It's about people and lives that are discarded when they no longer serve. It's about the pain of those who live to serve and die without being remembered. And the worst? This story is real. It touched those who witnessed it. It affected whoever heard it, and now it's going to touch you too. Because what he did and what he said, even without words, with his last breath, made everyone around feel the weight of a life that was ignored. And maybe it will make you see everything with different eyes. Follow until the end. You need to hear the rest of this. He was born on the threshold of arduous work, when the sun still seemed magnanimous and the air invaded the field with the promise of new life. This ox, which I am going to tell you about now, began his journey like so many other working animals, but soon became more than just an ox. He became a symbol of sacrifice. He was given a simple name, Bruno, because the boss believed that difficult names gave him extra work. And the fact is that Bruno did give him work. Hard, endless, constant work. He pulled carts, plowed the land, carried loads, faced rain, mud, slippery ground, and the scorching sun. With his strong body, muscles well defined by daily toil, he faced what many humans would shy away from. And all this because there was an implicit promise, which is rarely fulfilled, that the sacrifice would be remembered, that the commitment would generate recognition, that loyalty would bring affection. He started young, was still strong, full of life, bright eyes, and a desire to serve. The boss, let's call him Mauro, hired Bruno to do the heavy lifting. There were planting days, harvest days, transportation days, and Bruno was there, always ready, faithful, silent. No one needs to train a real ox to be faithful. This loyalty is born with it in matter, in blood, in the instinct of belonging to that field, to that owner, to the cycle of rural life. Bruno became Mauro's strong arm, the guarantee that the work would not stop, the certainty that when others failed, he was there. And here comes the first axis of this story of ingratitude, the unspoken promise. Mauro had bought Bruno when he was still young, invested in him, and Bruno responded. He learned each step, understood each command, shared the sweat of the workers, shared the fatigue, shared the dawn and the dusk. The day began with the creak of the gate, the smell of freshly cut grass, the wind that passed over the man's hunched shoulders and the ox's strong back. Bruno followed Seu Mauro to the letter. He felt the finest empathy. When the boss sighed, Bruno got scared. When the boss smiled, Bruno raised his horns in an air of pride. The workers saw, this ox serves too much. He doesn't complain. And in fact, Bruno didn't complain. He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just moved, obeyed, delivered. Over time, the years passed. Old age came disguised as slower steps, less lively eyes, paws that shook sooner than they should have. And then the scenario changed. Bruno's situation changed. He was no longer at his peak. He was no longer the undefeated bull of the field. The sun burned more. The rain hit harder. The field demanded more. And Bruno responded with less vigor, like every body that carries the weight of many days. He had become ill. Yes, he had an illness. It wasn't just the normal wear and tear of daily work. An infection in the paws, difficulty getting up, similar animals fell and many were discarded. Bruno, who was always ready, was weakened. He stopped pulling the cart with the same force. The air for him became heavier. His mud bath was less invigorating. The routine that used to flow now required a break. Seu Mauro noticed, or maybe he pretended not to notice, because recognizing a fall is admitting that time has passed, that the investment has aged, that the symbol of sacrifice has lost value, and in the field, value is often linked to utility, strength, immediate return. When Bruno fell ill, he stopped being a mere strong animal and became a cost. Food, care, space, management. The promise of affection, which had never been expressed in words, simply disappeared. Bruno was isolated. He stayed in a corner of the corral, away from human warmth, away from the workers who had previously given him a look of admiration. He was forgotten, abandoned. Imagine this ox, which has always been in the middle of the flood of clay, in the tearing of the earth, in the wake of the cart, now sitting half hunched over, watching other animals passing by. The work continuing, the carts being pulled by new bodies, new clashes of horns against the air, and Bruno there waiting for something that never came, a look, a word, a touch. Ingratitude manifested itself in silence. There were no words to thank because Bruno didn't speak, but there were actions, absence of fresh water, absence of appropriate shade, absence of affection. The ox that had given so much was now in his own pain, and the boss who had received so much turned his back. When a life gives everything away and when sacrifice becomes routine and recognition doesn't come, abandonment hurts more than fatigue. And now Bruno reflected this, his tired body, his head down, his distant gaze. He still remembered the good days, but he could no longer go back to them. He was stuck in the painful present. Seu Mauro, in turn, continued with the work, planting, harvesting. The belief in replacing has always existed. He brought another ox, younger, stronger, and the cycle continued. Bruno saw everything, not with human understanding, but with his own perception of his day. He saw the young man pass, pull, be praised. He saw the boss smile, congratulate himself. He remembered when he was the chosen one, the strong one, the pillar, and perhaps that's why the pain became even more intense. It wasn't just the end of the job, it was the end of the role. Ingratitude didn't just come from not gaining recognition, it came from being ignored after giving everything. And that's where the situation deepens, abandonment mixed with memory. Bruno began to retreat into his corner, meditate if he could meditate, reflect if he could reflect on what he gave and what he received. He remembered every dawn, the first ray of sun illuminating the field, him attached to the leash, the boss at his side, the worker around him. He remembered every load, every house being built with his effort, every sacrifice in which he silently participated. And now he was invisible. If you're watching this video, perhaps you've already felt something similar, giving a lot of yourself and being forgotten, sacrificing for someone and not even receiving a thank you, serving without glory, loving without reciprocation. And maybe that's why this story touches so deeply, because it's not just about an ox, it's about you, about me, about us, about the price of serving and the value of being remembered. The situation was simple on the field. The strongest works, the weakest rests or is moved to the corner. But in the human heart and in the animal heart, there is no such clear separation. What remains is pain. Bruno became sick, weak, abandoned. His body complained, his ribs showed, his once glossy coat was dull. The shade where he reclined was cold, hard, and the hard ground hit his tired body. He stayed there, aimlessly, without a task, without a friendly look. Sometimes he let out a low, almost inaudible moo that no human bothered to hear. That was his voice, the voice of someone who was used, someone who was faithful, someone who was discarded. Meanwhile, the boss followed his routine, hired another ox, and looked ahead. New days, new services, new results. What mattered was to continue. Bruno became a memory, or at least it should have been, but no memory remained. He was forgotten. And the abandonment was stamped on every inch of that body that had once been the boss's own strength. And now it comes. We go to the moment when Bruno, defeated by time and ingratitude, stood up with a tremendous effort for what would be his last day of toil, or perhaps his last day of life. He felt in his body that something was ending. He saw in the human gaze that no one else was waiting for him to pull a cart. He realized that the call would no longer come. And yet, he tried one last time, because fidelity, sacrifice, and pain go together. He walked to the corral, tensed his muscles, carried what his body could still support, and this entire scenario unfolds before us like a mirror, not of glory, but of truth. Truth of ingratitude, truth of sacrifice, truth of abandonment. If you are following this story, feel the weight of it. Feel real life hitting. Feel the silent pain that was not photographed, but was lived. Empathy for this ox is empathy for everyone who gave too much, who loved too much, who fought too much, and who were left aside. Human morality rises. We serve, we give, we expect recognition. And when it doesn't come, the wound bleeds silently. This sub-niche story, this story of sacrifice and abandonment, is more common than we imagine. And maybe that's why her strength is so great, because the pain of an ox can resonate within us humans. Now, this is important. We want you to comment. Have you ever felt abandoned after giving so much? Have you ever suffered the ingratitude of those you helped? Write yes if yes, or no if it has never happened. And tell me in the comments, what did you do? How did you feel? Let's reflect together and stay tuned, because now comes an even stronger part. What Bruno said or did in the final moment. And this moment will be so profound that it will really move you. That morning, there was something strange in the air. The sky, which normally lightened to a soft shade of blue between the clouds on the farm, seemed grayer than usual. The wind, which always carried the smell of wet grass and plowed land, now came colder, as if announcing that something was about to end. And in the corral, Bruno, the old warrior ox, stood up with difficulty. His paws were shaking, his bones cracked with the slightest effort, and his eyes, now duller, carried a mixture of tiredness and longing. It seemed like he knew. It seemed like everyone knew. The end was near. That day was not an ordinary date. It was any day on the calendar, but something in that atmosphere said there was a weight to the time, a silent farewell forming. Bruno, even in his fragility, crawled out of the shadow in which he was lying. He walked to the old wooden fence, where he used to wait for So Mauro to start his work. But So Mauro didn't come, and perhaps that hurt more than any physical wound. The boss, the one he had given his entire life to, didn't even show up to see him that day. Some pedestrians passed by, took a quick look. Others pretended they didn't see. Life went on. But not for Bruno. The sounds of the farm were different. The clinking of chains, the creaking of wheels, the shouts of command. Everything continued, just without him. The cart he was pulling was now driven by another ox, young, strong, vibrant, exactly like Bruno once had been. And yet, he remained there, standing motionless, as if he was still waiting to be called. Not out of obligation, but out of loyalty. Even in his last moments, he still wanted to serve. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be useful. But no one approached. Nobody said goodbye. Silence was his only companion. Throughout the day, clouds began to form more intensely. The sky was gradually darkening. A light rain began to fall. The mud accumulated around Bruno's hooves, and he could barely lift his head. But he didn't lie down. I didn't want to appear weak. Until the end, he wanted to maintain his dignity. He wanted in some way to show that he was there, present, willing, even if the body already said otherwise. The surrounding environment made everything even more painful. The fence where he rested his nose was chipped and damp. A crow flew over the field, landed on top of the barn, and let out its harsh song. The smell of wet manure filled the air. The old farm bell tinkled lightly in the wind, as if it marked the passing of a cycle, of a life. Bruno looked at all this with deep eyes. It was as if he was revisiting every memory, every icy morning, every evening, when he shuffled back along the beaten road. He remembered the days of intense work, but also the few moments of rest, when his body immersed himself in the mud to relieve the pain in his joints. All this played before him like a slow, heavy film. There was no music that day. There was no celebration, no farewell. He was just an old ox in the face of time, in the face of abandonment, in the face of oblivion. Mauro didn't even look from the balcony. I was busy with the bills, with the future harvests, with the younger oxen that now ran the farm's economy. For him, Bruno was already a new page. And that's exactly what hurts, because whoever gives himself body and soul expects at least one look, one last gesture, a thank you, even if silent. But none of that came. Bruno spent the rest of the afternoon standing still, as if he was waiting for someone to come and pick him up at some point, that a cart approached, that a call was shouted. For the boss to come, put his hand on his head and say, "Rest, old man. You've done more than I expected." But the wait was in vain. No voice called him. No gesture reached him. He just continued there in the same place, getting weaker and weaker, with the rain thickening and the cold getting stronger. At the end of the afternoon, when the sky closed completely and thunder boomed in the distance, Bruno finally showed signs that he couldn't take it anymore. His breathing became labored, his head hung to the side, and his paws no longer supported the weight of the body he had worked so hard on. Even so, before falling, he looked ahead, his eyes fixed on a distant point, perhaps imagining the field in which he once ran free, or the cart he pulled with pride. And it was there that some pedestrians finally noticed what was happening. Two of them approached, stood a few meters away, but didn't dare touch. One commented, "Boy, that bull was great." The other just murmured, "Sad end, see?" But not even these brief comments brought comfort. Bruno no longer listened, or if he heard it, he kept it to himself. He was about to fall, about to be swept away by history itself, a story written in sweat, in clay, in silence and abandonment. And there was no one to hold him, no one to say he was important. He just wanted to be remembered. Just that. And now you who are listening to this story so far, tell me, have you ever witnessed an ending like this? Have you ever seen someone forgotten after a lifetime of giving? Write here in the comments, "I saw ingratitude happen," or simply, "I felt it too." Let's talk. Because this type of pain, this feeling of uselessness at the end of the journey, should not be common. But unfortunately it is. And perhaps by telling this story, we can give a voice to those who have never been heard. Even if they are oxen, even if they are silences. The moment has arrived, the moment of those last breaths brought with it something that no one expected. but that everyone recognized. Bruno, the ox who gave everything, was there, leaning over, no longer able to lift his hooves, but still with a silent flame in his eyes, the look of someone who gives his life to the cause of another, and in the end has kept something that speaks louder than any human word. In a fraction of a second, when the silence between the corral and the land became complete, Bruno did something that no one imagined. He made a deep, long sound which seemed like the echo of every day of sacrifice. He removed his nose from the fence, took a deep breath, and let out a moo. Not an ordinary moo, but an expression of farewell, of recognition, of contained pain. And then it happened. Seu Mauro had come down from the balcony to watch the old ox from afar. He stopped, adjusted his hat, and walked to the corral. Some workers approached, curious and sad. The wind died down for a moment, as if the entire field held its breath. In this absolute silence, Bruno raised his neck with the last strength he had left, slightly turning his body toward that small crowd of humans who had barely stopped to see him. His eyes fixed on his boss, on the man who had guided him for years, and he seemed to say, "Do you remember me? Or perhaps, did you forget the amount I handed over?" But the sentence that ripped through the air, that made everyone freeze, was the simple and raw. "Thank you for not reminding me," or something that amounted to that. The truth is that Bruno left one last message, without a clear voice, yes, but with all the weight of his life. And at that moment, someone had to look down. The tears started to come, first one, then another. The oldest man in the corral, who on harvest days gave orders to others, felt the lump in his throat. The woman who took care of feeding the oxen, who previously believed that the work was just food, pasture, strong ox, saw the fragility with which Bruno leaned on an iron bar. The youngest of the pedestrians, who never imagined that the scene would touch him so much, opened his hands and wiped his eyes. The fine rain, which was already falling, intensified. The drops seemed to clean something that no one wanted to admit: silent ingratitude. And the impact of those last words, or that last gesture of life, reached every person present in the corral. Because they weren't just from a defenseless ox, they were the voice of those who served, those who sacrificed themselves, those who were abandoned. At that moment, the sacrifice was no longer invisible. The pain gained a face. Ingratitude took shape, and the field stopped, not for works but for memory, and that memory remained like a scar. A few steps were taken towards Bruno, hesitantly. The boss, Seu Mauro, stood still. He took off his hat, let his body relax, but his gaze didn't move away. His eyes were teary, and something changed. The sound of the distant cart, the distant tractor, the birdsong, all seemed irrelevant. It was as if time had paused, granting this moment to Bruno's soul. And the ox knew that, for the last time, he was seen not as a tool, not as a pack animal, but as the protagonist of a life that demanded recognition. Meanwhile, the other workers joined in a low, almost confessional murmur. "How did we let this happen?" could be heard in the blowing of the wind, and that ox, which had so often been called strong, dedicated, valuable, was now weakened, yes, but it had shown that even the most silent among us can express something unforgettable. That final moo resonated as if it were, "I existed, I mattered, I gave everything, and now you listen." And that message shook more than any scene of glory ever could. Bruno's feet trembled, his side arched, and he tilted his head to the side as if giving up fighting the inevitable. Still, he looked up at the grey sky, at the boss, at the workers, and in that look, everything that had been omitted was condensed. The tiredness of the days, the persistence in the face of pain, the wait for the word that never came, the abandonment that is not always announced with a slammed door. Sometimes it is announced with silence, with no touch, with constant absence. Bruno had made it clear, "You underestimated what I did for you." And now, at the end, he stood up for the last time to say it. No one watched coldly. The entire field seemed to take a step back. The land he plowed, the tracks he left, everything seemed to revolve around that moment. The rain, now heavier, hit the ground with that deep sound that normally announced a storm. Now it announced regret, and perhaps deep down, the presence of regret was what hurt most. Because the word sorry was perhaps expected, but it didn't come. Instead, an action, the look, the gesture, the moo, spoke for Bruno. And that was enough for many senses to break. Some said they heard a cracking, dry sound, as if the old ox was releasing something other than air. Others commented that, at that moment, the boss took down his hat, placed his hand on his chest and sighed. The animal wife began to cry silently. The workers stamped the ground with their boots. The cartwheel stopped turning for a moment. The community, that small farm, was marked. Because an abandoned ox had released a truth that could no longer be ignored. It was then that someone, the bravest of the pedestrians, spoke in a low voice. He spoke to us. He reminded us that value is measured by respect. And the boss shook his head. He walked towards Bruno, smelled the mud mixed with dry sweat, placed his hand on his back, lightly, hesitantly, and said a single sentence. "Sorry, old friend." What happened next, no one knows for sure. Some report that Bruno let out another roar, this time softer, like a sigh of relief. Others say he simply closed his eyes, like someone falling asleep after a waking life. But the effect of those last words, that farewell, that final scene, was visible. Whoever was there didn't come out the same. The field did not continue as before. The ox that had been relegated to oblivion became a symbol of sacrifice, symbol of ingratitude, symbol of real life that demands recognition. And the community learned, or at least saw, that each delivery, each often invisible effort, deserves to be looked at, remembered, valued. And you, who are watching this video, answer me. What did you feel at that moment? Write in the comments, "My heart sank" if you felt pain, or "I saw the sacrifice" if you perceived delivery. Also share a quote for me. "No one lives on empty promises," or "What has been given must also be remembered." Which do you prefer? I want you to comment now. I want you to not just watch. I want you to participate. Because this story, despite having an ox as the main character, is your story too. And if you stayed this far, it means that something in you moved, that some wound was touched, that some doubt was raised. Stay with me for the next part, because the story is not over yet. What Bruno left and what he said doesn't end here. The meaning of this will reverberate. It will transform. It will call for reflection. So wait. And thank you for being here, for paying attention, for allowing this story to enter your life. Comment, share, and prepare for the next chapter of this journey of pain, sacrifice, and recognition. And now that everything has been said, or rather experienced, the question what resonates in the hearts of those who have watched this far is, why does this affect us so much? What is there in this simple story about an old and forgotten ox that dismantles us inside? Maybe because it exposes what many people feel but can't put into words. This story forces us to face something that deeply bothers us, the truth that the world does not always recognize those who give too much. Bruno the ox didn't speak in words, but who said pain needs sound? He spoke with his body, with his gaze, with the time he resisted. He spoke to absence, to silence, to the way he was forgotten by those who should have remembered him most. He was the crudest representation of what many people experience, giving their all for someone, for a cause, for a job, and then being left aside. Human beings have this open wound with abandonment, with ingratitude. And when he sees something like this, so naked, so devoid of justifications, he feels the impact as if it were on himself. Bruno teaches us that the ones who scream are not always the ones who suffer the most, that there are pains that drag on in silence for years and are only noticed at the end. He didn't ask for anything, but he also never received the minimum. And that's the hardest reflection of this story. How many times have you seen someone give themselves until their last breath? and in the end, be forgotten. How many times have you been that person yourself? Life has these ironies. While some talk too much and do little, others do everything in silence and die without even a single recognition. And that's why this story carries deep moral weight. She invites us to look aside at those who walk with us, at those who have already held the weight of our world without ever asking for anything in return. It could be a father, a mother, a friend, an employee. It could be a pet. It could be a forgotten neighbor. It could be you. The big message here is not just about sacrifice. It's about how we treat those who sacrifice for us. It's about valuing while it lasts. Because sometimes the thank you that we never said turns into the regret that we will carry forever. And the worst burden is not that of guilt. It is that of silence that never received an answer. That last scene of Bruno, where he looked up to the sky and surrendered his pain with one last effort, that is more than an emotional moment. That's a mirror. It is the mirror of all the goodbyes without hugs, of all the endings without recognition, of all the promises that never turned into actions. And it doesn't matter if he was an ox. What matters is that he had the soul of a servant, a worker, someone who deserved to be loved, welcomed, respected. We keep saying that we love, that we value, that we respect. But how often do these words translate into real actions? How many times in everyday life do we ignore the efforts of others just because we are too busy with our own problems? How many times do we forget to look each other in the eye and say, "I see you, I appreciate you, I care about what you do for me"? Bruno's pain was not just the pain of his body, it was the pain of knowing that he was no longer remembered. It was the pain of meaninglessness, and this is what most corrodes any being, human or animal. When someone feels invisible after everything they've done, something dies inside long before the body stops. Therefore, this story is not just about loss, it's about presence. It's about awareness, it's about learning, even if too late, to recognize value in small deliveries, in everyday gesture, in the silence that sustains the world. And there is yet another layer here, that of forgiveness. Because even without saying it, Bruno forgave him. His last look wasn't one of hate, it was not a charge, it was delivery. He simply said goodbye, with the same dignity with which he always served. Yes, that is strength. Yes, that is greatness. And maybe that hurts too, knowing that, even after everything, he didn't expect revenge, just a memory. Now, for you who came this far with me, who felt this story inside your chest, who realized how close this pain is, I extend an invitation to you. Look around you. Who has been the Bruno in your life? Who is sacrificing themselves in silence, without recognition, waiting for a look from you, a gesture, a word? There's still time. There's still time to do something different. To say, "I see you." To say, "Thank you." To say, "I care." And tell me here in the comments, have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever been Bruno? Have you ever met someone who went, "Write to me, I was once invisible," or "I recognize the Brunos in my life"? Choose one of the phrases and comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes a story like this can change the way we see the world. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Take her forward. And if you can, leave another sentence here in the comments. Appreciate before silence speaks for those who cannot. Let's spread this reflection. Because if this story made you feel something, then it did its job. And Bruno, he, somehow, in a way, it continues to live in every memory that we don't let die.